to the world. No other nation was more hungry and thirsty for the coming of the Messiah than the Israel of 2,000 years ago. Why, I'm asking you, did they then not accept this Jesus as the Messiah, a term which at that time was totally unknown to the rest of the world, because it was a pure Hebraism? That question is begging to be answered, and my only answer is that he was not yet the Messiah of the Jews, but indeed he did become the Savior of the Gentile church. And I refuse to think in narrow categories of black and white, or yes or no. I credit my Lord in heaven with more fantasy and imagination than the pure, narrow yes or no. There must be 500 things between. And the between possibilities are that he has become the Savior of the Gentile church, a fact I would never gainsay. But he has not yet become the Messiah of Israel, could very well become that during his second coming.
Dr. Kaiser, why don't you answer that question too, and we'll get another question here.
I would say that my feeling is the Zechariah 12:10 passage comes back, and here the prophet himself has Israel being regretful at a certain point in history over this one who was the central hope and is identified in some way with the speaker, the Lord himself. They shall look on me, whom they have pierced, and mourn. Why the mourning there? And why does the prophet, who is not speaking from a Christian perspective, still see in the day of the Lord, Yom Yahweh, the whole moment here when everything is pulled together, why does he see this as a moment of regret? And I can only say that indeed it's not because this was the Jesus or the Yeshua of the Gentiles, but it was what the Jewish community recognized itself for the most unrecorded part of history, and the place for the best historical work yet to be done, I think, is in the first 5 common era or Christian centuries here, in which there was in Palestine, in Jerusalem, and the surrounding cities, a large Hebrew believing community that did place their trust in Yeshua. Some historians, Neander and others, have said to the tune already by the 2nd century, 1 million were involved in basic belief. I have no way of checking these kinds of things, but I have seen recently some of the documents which are beginning to roll in. There was a large, large community. It wasn't just Pella, which is generally said here. We're talking about 20, 30 different sites, some of them in which we are uncovering here kind of synagogue and Christian mix and blend. And it speaks of the fact that it was less a moment of tension in the first Christian centuries or common era than it is now. There's a greater rift between the two because this is seen as an abandonment of one's Jewishness if one goes to this particular point. But it was not seen apparently in the early Christian or common era centuries.
Let me ask, and you can follow up, and then we got this question. One thing that in reading the Hebrew Scriptures myself, it seemed to me that there were other times when the Jews had straight revelation and missed it completely. The Exodus is point in case. They just come right out of Egypt. God does wonderful miracles, and they turn around and they don't believe God. Now, why they didn't do that, I think we're all sinners, but it seems like if they could miss that under Moses, they might be able to miss some of these things on the Messiah. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense, I'm afraid, because the Hebrew Bible, of all books of the world religions, over 500 in number, I know none which treats its own believers in such a cruelly realistic manner as the Hebrew Bible does with its Jews. All our weaknesses are stressed, all our virtues are underplayed. It's true. That's one of the reasons why we are elected, it seems to me, because self-criticism is a Jewish invention. But let me put it that way. Let me put it that way. You are quite right. But one piece of an answer you will find in Daniel 10. Daniel 10:40 says, I, Daniel, saw this vision of God, and the people standing around with me did not see it. Visions imparted by God in both testaments are always to single persons, to unique personalities, metaphysically gifted, with a high degree of vision and audition, and the others don't get it. And it takes all the trouble in the world for that seer to impart his message to the others who fail to see and hear.
I read that in your book, and I appreciated that insight, because what you're saying is it can be true even if one person goes against the majority.
Yes, I'm afraid you're right.
Okay, then we got to come back to the test of Deuteronomy 18 to find out if that person has the real goods, because the rest of us didn't see it.
When my friend Kaiser quotes Zechariah, they will look upon him whom they have pierced and mourn.
Look on me.
Look upon me whom they have pierced and mourn. Let me stick to the text, Kaiser. We never pierced Jesus. By all four Gospels, the Roman soldiers pierced him in the most brutal manner. No Jew ever would have done that, because it would have been the pinnacle of cruelty. So the prophecy doesn't stick. We have not pierced Jesus by any matter or by any circumlocution of poetry.
I think you're right on the point of the Romans. It is the Romans, and I know the point you're making, and I respond to it. However, I am also quoting a Jewish prophet. I didn't write that text. I'm only repeating it, as you know. And I take it there that it is a figure of speech by metonymy or something of that sort. My point isn't to find out where the fault lies. I don't think that's what the writer is talking about. I think what the writer is talking about, the identity between the one who was pierced and the one who is associated with God and the one who is a servant who is coming back in that glorious section of Zechariah 9 through 14. Christians, you know, haven't had a monopoly just on Isaiah 53. If there's another passage that is quoted more than any other, it's Zechariah 9 through 14. In the Passion narrative, that plays as large a part as does Isaiah 53. And third place would come the Psalms, too, the so-called Messianic Psalms. So we've got at least three strings here upon which the New Testament writers are playing quite a bit, rather than just one particular passage. But no, I think that's wrong. Let me say it plainly. Christians are in error when they say that Jews are the ones who killed Jesus. I think that's poor. It is no wonder we've got trouble in a dialogue. And if I can say something